On Tech News Today, Eastern European gangs perfect the phishing attack. A major TV show is going to be streamed on Twitch. And HP's former CEO calls Apple's current CEO a big, fat hypocrite. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com. It's time for Twit's annual audience survey, and we want to hear from you. Please visit twit.tv/survey and let us know what you think. It only takes a few minutes, and your anonymous feedback will help us make Twit even better. We thank you so much for your continued support. Twit.tv/survey.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, April 3rd, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used iPhone, iPad, and other Apple products are worth at Gazelle.com. And by Prosper. Prosper is a peer-to-peer lending marketplace that connects people who are looking to borrow money with those who have money to lend. Visit prosper.com/twit and receive a $50 Visa gift card when you get a loan. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. It is the iPad's 5th birthday. That's right, 5 years of the iPad. My name is Mike Elgan, and joining me is co-anchor Mashable senior tech analyst Christina Warren. Christina, where does the time go?
I don't know, but I remember where I was 5 years ago for the iPad. I was waiting in line in Atlanta at a mall for a couple of hours, actually, to get the iPad. And it was a Saturday, I think. And I had the 3G one, I had the 3G model pre-ordered, but I wasn't going to get that for a month. So I had to go into the store and wait in line, I guess in the pre-order thing, to get the Wi-Fi model. I ended up buying both and giving one to my husband after a month.
Wow.
And no, so because we needed to do reviews at Mashable and we were much, much smaller then. And so, we needed to do an unboxing and a hands-on that day. And then I personally wanted the 3G model. My husband was like, well, I'll give you the money for it, and I'll take the Wi-Fi one for you after a month. But it's funny because a lot of people were not sure on that launch day. You know, it was a big lineup, not as big as the iPhone 4, which was a couple of months later, but it was, a big lineup. But I know a lot of people in the tech press were like not so convinced it was going to be a huge hit. But you know how I knew it was going to be huge, Mike?
That I said it was going to be?
That you said it was going to be, but also that day I had lunch with my mom at the Cheesecake Factory. Again, this is at the mall in Atlanta. And I showed it to her, and my mom, who hadn't been following any of the hype, any of the tech, didn't know any of the marketing lingo, is seeing it, and she goes, "It's like magic." Yeah. And that had been one of the things Steve Jobs had been talking about. It's magical. It's this, it's that. My mom hadn't been following any of that. And the first words out of her mouth was, "It's like magic." And she fell in love. And I got her a 3G model a few months later for her birthday. And she became kind of a diehard iPad person and basically selling them to everybody that she would show them off to. But my mom is always my muse for what middle America and regular people are going to appreciate and really jump on board with. And when I saw her eyes and her face when she touched it, I knew. I was like, this is going to be a product that we haven't seen the likes of in a really long time. Absolutely
true. And I was a huge proponent of the iPad and said that it would be massively successful. And it basically follows my overarching theory about technology in general, which is that we tend to think that we need stuff and that we buy consumer electronics like smartphones and things like that for practical necessity or benefit, and we don't. We buy the things that make us feel good, and things like multi-touch user interfaces on a bigger screen made us feel really good. That's what your mom was detecting. It just swiping and have it be responsive was fantastic. Felt really good, and therefore that's what opens wallets. That's why we go to the movies. That's why we go to on vacations. That's why we go to restaurants, because they make us feel good. We don't go to restaurants because we need nutrients. We go because it's fun to be served, and you don't have to do the dishes, and it's good food and all that stuff. So anyway, here it is. It's not as successful as it was supposed to be. However,
it's weird though. It's more successful than we all predicted, and then we all got too excited and said, "Oh, it's going to be bigger than the phone." And that's where I think we lost the script. I think it's as successful as it was supposed to be. It's just that when we saw how much people took to the bigger screen, the bigger and into the touch interface, and really got used to that idea, we all started saying, not only is this going to replace computers, and I do think that in 10 years, the way that we use laptops and the way we use desktops are going to be probably, honestly, more similar to kind of a Microsoft Surface world than what we do currently. I do feel like we are moving in the direction where tablets are kind of going to become the main screen, because your phone is your main screen, but I feel like tablets will take a bigger role. But I think where we lost the script is when people started thinking, the phone industry keeps exploding and keeps getting bigger, and the iPad, the tablet industry is going to mirror that exactly. And it didn't. And I don't think that it was supposed to. And I've written a lot about that, how I think, a lot of analysts tried to overcompensate for being wrong about how fast that tablet would get adopted by basically predicting it was going to then follow the same patterns as phones. And as I said, I truly do believe that the phone is the new center of the universe. But that doesn't mean that tablets don't play an important role and that they can't still, in the 5 years later, it hasn't been a huge success. And that, the way, especially if you look at younger children, the way they, interact with things, it's changed so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's going to be a long time before anything reaches the heights of the smartphone. It's just the smartphone is like a necessity. You have to have one. It's a very powerful computer that's in your pocket, that's connected by default to the internet and to the phone system. It's something very central. And but it has to be said also about the iPad that I think from an industry history point of view, it was a historic product because Apple came out with this consumer electronics product and they literally had no competition for a year. And then a year after that, they literally had no good competition. So they owned the market for 2 years. You will never find at any point in the history of consumer electronics where a company just completely owned a market like that. It was just completely unprecedented. And of course, the Android tablets caught up, and then Microsoft came out with their Surface and so on. But quite an unprecedented product. I don't think we're going to see another one like it anytime soon. Well, why don't we jump into the news today? IBM says they've discovered a sophisticated fraud that combines phishing, malware, and phone calls that has extracted more than $1 million from U.S. companies. They say the scheme, which they're calling the Dyre Wolf for some reason, is coming from well-funded Eastern European cyber criminals. Here's how it works. Phishing attack malware, which arrives on the systems in the normal way, lurks on the victim's machines waiting for them to go to a bank site, and the malware detects when a site is the site of a bank. Then it creates a screen, a fake screen using the information about that bank and says, we need to do something with your account, but we can't do this online, you need to call, and it provides a number. And then the malware sends the information about which bank it is to the person answering the phone so they can answer the phone and say the bank when they answer the phone. And then they're provided with, they then provide that information to the person to socially engineer the victim. So the whole time they think that this is all a big security process for protecting the user. And then, of course, they get the password, they get all the information, and then they remove the funds from that account. This is the most brilliant and sophisticated, and it sounds expensive too. They need a bank of people standing by on phones, Christina Warren.
Yes.
But this is really quite a sophisticated attack.
No, it really is, and they play. What's so brilliant and I guess terrible about it, but truly brilliant is that they follow the protocols that the banks currently follow now. Like if I had this instance the other day where I made some sort of purchase that set off fraud alerts with Bank of America, and they sent me a text message telling me that there was some fraudulent activity and to call the bank, and provided a number in the text message, and I call the number and then I verify myself and I go through the process. That's the standard process that you're going through. So when people are getting these messages, I got an email as well. So when people are getting these messages, they're going through the process. That's not unlike what the banks actually do when they're trying to check on these things. And that's, I think, what's really brilliant, but as I said, terrible and scary about this is that they're following the standard protocols. Obviously, like you said, this is not a inexpensive thing to run. You've got to have a bank of people. You've got to have this really secure, this really kind of a not secure, but sophisticated software that's kind of able to redirect things with the malware to show them the names of the banks they're offering. But wow.
Yeah. Wow. Really amazing. What is also amazing is that they only stole $1 million. I would think that something this sophisticated, they'd be into it for a long time, but I guess we don't know how long this has been going on. At least I don't know how long it's been going on. So it's great that IBM is on the case. So great news for you, IBM. Well, we got some more news for you in just a second, but first, let me tell you about Gazelle. Of course, you know Gazelle is a great place to sell your used gadget. Just go to the website, GAZELLE.com. Choose the device that you have sitting around that's losing value and gathering dust. Indicate what condition it's in, fantastic condition, so-so condition, whatever. And then they'll send you a box. You put it in the box and off it goes, and you get paid fast. It's always been a great place to sell your device, but now it's a great place to buy a new device. If you have a new Android device and you drop it and it smashes, as some of the new ones tend to do, you can get that same device replaced for much less than you'd pay if you had to buy a new one again. And of course, if you get a certified pre-owned phone or tablet from Gazelle, it's going to be in fantastic shape. They put it through a 30-point inspection to make sure everything is fully functional. Of course, the certified like new category of device is indistinguishable from a brand new device. So make sure you sell and buy your phones and tablets and other products from Gazelle and to Gazelle. Find out what your iPhone's worth. Take a minute and go to Gazelle.com to find out. For the first time ever, a mainstream TV show will be broadcast on Twitch, which is Amazon's live streaming site used mostly by gamers. The show, of course, will be Season 2 premiere of HBO's Silicon Valley on April 8th. They're doing it Twitch style, too, starting with a live chat with a cast before the show starts. Christina Warren, this is clearly a publicity stunt, but it's a good one. And
it's a great one.
I love Silicon Valley, the show, and this is really going to be fun to have them sitting around yakking before the event. I think this is a kind of a perfect publicity stunt for Twitch.
It is. Well, I was going to say what makes this work is a couple of things. One, it's the right show with the right technology, right? You know what I'm saying? Because Twitch is the perfect show. I mean, if you're going to do a show on Twitch, I think Silicon Valley is the perfect show to do it with, because it is so much about the Valley and so much of the inside baseball stuff. And the fact that, Twitch became kind of this big, thing kind of, from the ashes of Justin TV and became, this huge acquisition from Amazon was a big Silicon Valley story in real life. It makes sense for them to take the characters and take the actors and put them in the Twitch style and in that universe and have them talk about it. I think it's genius. I don't think it would work with every show, but I think for Silicon Valley, it's super, super smart. And I think it shows, once again, just how smart HBO has been and Mike Judge has been with Silicon Valley of really talking the right language and really towing that line of satire just brilliantly, to the point that it's accessible for people who aren't in the world. They can maybe get a taste of what it's like. And if you are in the world, you just laugh even harder because of how much they get correct. Yeah, and a lot of it is kind of ripped from the headlines. And, it's also a great idea. It has to be said, because this particular cast is really kind of, they're snarky. They're very cool bunch of people. They're blatantly critical of Silicon Valley seriousness and all the rest, save the world type stuff. And so I've seen them at other events, and they're just really funny as people. Yes, they are. And I think that's what makes it work, too, is it's going to be a really fun experience for the fans and for people to watch. And whether they do it in character or they do it as themselves, it's going to be entertaining. And they're the right actors who are part of this enough and are in on the joke enough and are acerbic, like you said, and snarky. And we'll make it a fun time. So I think this is great. Good for HBO, and a great pickup for Twitch and Amazon, too, because, this is obviously an interesting sort of partnership. You kind of usually don't see pay networks, partnering with streaming services this way in advance for something that's premiering on their pay network. I think that's pretty cool.
I do too. Great move, HBO and Twitch. Well, we reported twice this week about Tim Cook's Washington Post op-ed slamming so-called religious freedom laws, which he says discriminate against gay people. But now former HP CEO and likely future presidential candidate Carly Fiorina says Cook is a hypocrite. She told the Wall Street Journal that, quote, when Tim Cook is upset about all the places he does business because of the way that they treat gays and women, he needs to withdraw from 90% of the markets that he's in, including China and Saudi Arabia. But I don't see him being upset about that, unquote. She also said there was nothing objectionable in the religious freedom law passed in Indiana last week. Christina Warner, what do you think about Carly Fiorina as a presidential candidate, separate from this whole issue?
Well, I'm just going to say this. People like Carly Fiorina anger me because she set women CEOs back so far by being just, I mean, thank God for Leo Apotheker, who actually did a worse job at HP than she did, but she oversaw one of the worst mergers in corporate history.
Yeah.
The HP Compaq merger was one of the worst in corporate history on every single level. And kind of like Geraldine Ferrero set female political candidates back, she set female CEOs back. I'm going to be honest and say that. This is my personal opinion. So, her potential as a presidential candidate, no. I mean, she couldn't buy herself a Senate seat. So, no, Carly, no. No.
I agree with you that she was a horrible CEO for HP. And one of the interesting things at the time that she was a CEO, by the way, was how short of a distance she had gone in life. She went to Palo Alto High School. And then she went to Stanford, and then she worked at some other company. I don't remember what it was. And then HP,
another one, right. And
all of which were like a 3-mile radius of each other in Palo Alto. So that was really interesting. But yeah, she was a terrible CEO in the sense that, she's obviously a very intelligent woman, and I think capable in some ways. I mean, she was really good as a marketing person. But when she was the CEO, she basically said, well, the problem with HP is just this too all engineering and too techie. Right. Let's make it a consumer thing. She started bringing in celebrities to do their shows. She never wanted to talk about their enterprise products or any of that stuff, which is really their strong suit. Right. And she wanted to drive them and turn them into, Apple or something. And it just didn't work at all.
Remember they made the deal with Apple where HP had the branded iPods. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Which, it was basically an iPod that had an HP logo on the back. And I won one in some weird iPod Ponzi scheme thing. And I sold it on eBay to someone in Canada. I wish I'd kept it because that would have been a cool collector's item.
Yeah.
But no. And frankly, I know a number of people who worked for, so my now husband, he worked at Digital Equipment Corp, which then was acquired by Compaq, which then became HP. And I know other people who worked for HP or Compaq during kind of that transition period. And it was a pretty terrible time and one of the worst kind of corporate mergers ever because the cultures were so different. And she was completely unable to manage that at all. Again, thank God for Leo Apotheker, who actually did a worse job at HP than Carly did because he did the terrible autonomy deal that basically lost them he basically spent $10 billion on magic beans.
Yeah.
But we could do a whole show, Mike, on the misdeeds of HP and frankly of Ray Lane there, who was chairman of their board of directors. We could do a whole show on that about how the most illustrious company in Silicon Valley basically over the course of from about 2000 to about 2011 basically committed Harry.
Yeah, and don't get me started about what they did with Palm.
Oh, exactly. There's so much. If someone hasn't written a book, please write a book because then it can maybe become a fun TV movie. Maybe the Silicon Valley stars can even reference it because it would be kind of an amazing story.
Yeah. Be a long book, too, if you're going to go after all their misdeeds. Well, in product update news, Microsoft announced yesterday that its free Office Lens document scanning app is coming to iOS and Android. Yet another example of the new Microsoft that's trying to be more cross-platform. Great idea, Microsoft.
Agreed. Honestly, Microsoft, it's funny, they've been doing so many cool things. And I saw some story, I think it was yesterday, that they said that kind of the idea of an open source Windows wouldn't be out of the question, which... Yeah. Okay, now that's nuts. But it's kind of amazing that Microsoft is even having these kinds of conversations. I love that they're doing more cross-platform stuff. I love that they're putting things on GitHub, and I love that they're getting out of their silo of making everything. It's funny, they're in a lot of ways going back to the original vision of Microsoft that Bill Gates had. Where, the point was, a computer in every house and every home running Microsoft software was kind of the unspoken part of their motto. And honestly, that's how you achieve this, by putting it on everything and realizing, okay, if Windows isn't the center of the universe anymore, and it's increasingly not, Microsoft still makes really great software products. And I think the Lens is a great example of that. A lot of the Office 365 stuff is a good example of that. And they've got some really great tools and they've got amazing people working there. So I'm always happy when I see it going other places and when I see Microsoft getting out of, the bubble that they've kind of put themselves in for so long. It's nice to see them willing to break free and get their stuff out to more people.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you dropped the open source Windows bomb. That was an article on Wired by Katie Metz. And it was a reference to the strong opinions expressed by somebody named Mark Rushinovich, who's one of Microsoft's top engineers. And this guy was just saying, yeah, open source Windows is totally a possibility. Anything goes in today's market. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and this could very well happen. So this, I think, is, if nothing else, a glimpse into the sort of open-mindedness of Microsoft these days. And I'd love to see it. I personally thought that Microsoft would come out with its own variant of Linux long ago.
I thought that too. I did too, because, they actually do contribute to the kernel now. And, they have a lot of underlying technology that would work well. I think that actually, if I were Red Hat, certainly if I were Canonical, if Microsoft came out with a variant of Linux, I would be scared because... they had their support, they have their ecosystem. It's interesting too. I know Ray Bango, who runs kind of the IE team. They keep hiring people, really big names in the web evangelism and web standards community to work at Microsoft. People that who would not just take a paycheck, who are not going to go work at Microsoft just for money, who are leaving big posts and are coming with lots and lots of credibility. And they're doing that because they believe like they can make a difference. And Microsoft is really becoming more open. The fact that they're even letting an engineer speak to someone at Wired and say, I could see Windows becoming open source. Microsoft 5 years ago never would have let an engineer have that conversation. Microsoft 10 years ago wouldn't even let an engineer think that. So I think that's pretty incredible that we've come to this point where someone can say that in an interview, and that they're hiring these great people in the web standards community, and really trying to kind of push to being more open and being a better partner and player in the bigger computing ecosystem. Yeah,
absolutely true. Steve Ballmer would have thrown a chair at somebody 5 years ago for suggesting open source Windows. Very dangerous proposition, but I think that they've clearly decided we need to be everywhere. We need to be ubiquitous. We need to be, the default for everyone, because they just keep getting increasingly marginalized by sticking to their Windows-only thing and charging through the nose for everything. So that they're looking at cross-platform. They're looking at making things free to get people into the ecosystem and to encourage development and all the rest. It's all the right moves. I think that they're really onto something, and I think it's new Microsoft. They're going to be successful in the near future, I think. Well, Samsung will make the main chip in Apple's next iPhone, according to a Bloomberg report. The chip is called the A9, and Samsung had previously lost business to a company called Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing. We talked about the new Microsoft. This is the new Apple, where they're a little bit less thermonuclear war-y, Christina Warren, and a little bit more like, you know what, we just want to make tons and tons and tons and tons of money. So we got to work with people like Samsung.
Yeah, and I think that honestly, probably the fact that they were working with the Taiwan Semiconductor company was probably a good leverage move. I would not be surprised if Samsung ended up having to maybe make some concessions. Maybe, Apple got some better pricing, or they got some better promised yields. But I think another thing that probably honestly worked on Samsung's behalf is that, they can actually deliver. Whereas some of these other companies, we saw this with, the company that Apple invested in to make the sapphire glass, that really wasn't able to meet expectations. That it's when you're a company like Apple and you have all these different partners, you need to rely on those partners to be able to deliver what they promise. And some of these companies can do that, and some of them can't. And Samsung, whatever their other issues with Apple might be, can deliver in terms of as a supplier partner. They can actually deliver. They can actually fab those chips. They can actually, make that memory. They can do what they need to do. And Apple, I think fundamentally as a company, especially under, Tim Cook, maybe not as much under Steve Jobs, he's going to go and make sure that they can get the best product made regardless of, whatever other politics might be involved with the companies.
Yeah, absolutely true. Well, in product obituary news, Microsoft is killing off Kinect for Windows V2, which is the motion detecting peripheral for Windows PCs. Instead, Microsoft is actually coming out with an adapter that enables people to use the Kinect for Xbox with their PCs. They say that it's otherwise identical, Christina Warren, but that doesn't sound right to me. I remember when they were first working on the PC version of Kinect, they said, no, it's very different. The focus is much closer, and it's a completely different product. Now they're saying it's the same product.
Right, which, they were either lying before, they're lying now. I tend to think that they must have been lying before because the products did seem very similar, and it's possible maybe they had a software difference that would make the focus closer or something. I'm not really sure. This, to me, though, is something they should have done from the beginning. Don't make people buy a separate piece of accessories. It's kind of the same thing. It took them a long time to do this with game controllers, but, they used to make a game controller that looked just like the Xbox controller for Windows. but it wouldn't work with your Xbox and vice versa. Now they at least have adapters so they can work. And I mean, if you're going to have basically the same hardware, makes just some sort of adapter, because especially if they're pushing this whole one Windows meme where they want people to be able to develop for Windows is developing for Xbox and vice versa. And especially if they really are going to try to continue to push into this Kinect space, it doesn't make any sense to make developers have separate devices, because consumers probably aren't going to bother. You know, they're going to have whatever they get. And so, I mean, to me, they should have just come up with the adapter to begin with and never bothered with this separate device strategy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And my theory, of course, is that the reason that Kinect doesn't work on the PC and nobody really cares about it for the most part is because it's all about commands. It's all about sending commands to your PC, and that's an unnatural thing. Unlike, for example, on a multi-touch operating system, to actually touch something and move it is something that, you know, one-year-olds do, because that's a natural human a way to interact with the environment, whereas you doing like gestures in the air is not something that anybody's going to learn. What they need to do is apply the hardware in Kinect and other things like it, like leap motion, to understand human hand gestures. And sort of integrate those into voice capture and stuff like that in a creative way, or, you know, for Cortana to really detect how you're feeling based on how you're moving. That would be a fantastic use, because that is a very human behavior, to be able to read somebody's body language. Right,
be able to read if your brow is furrowed, if your, you know, shoulders are at a certain place, you know, if you've got something else going on, to kind of, you know, pick out what's happening. That would be great. I also feel like, you know, what they showed off with HoloLens is really interesting, because it's showing kind of the potential of the fusing of those two worlds, right? Where you've got, you know, kind of at that point, I think the gestures make more sense, because at that point you have a much more visually expansive space where those gestures make sense, versus when you're just gesturing to a screen versus something that feels like it's in your physical space. It maybe doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah, and also you're actually doing something that mimics actual reality.
Precisely.
If you see a virtual reality or an augmented reality object, you reach out and manipulate that object. That's a perfectly natural behavior, and that actually enhances the reality of this kind of system. And that's a perfect use for this sort of thing. And of course, Magic Leap. Is it Magic Leap? No, Leap Motion. Leap Motion has actually worked with Oculus to sort of glue it on the front, and then you have your virtual hands that you see on the screen are actually your hands being sort of reinterpreted in software.
Exactly.
This is necessary, you know.
I agree. I mean, and I always point to this, and I sound like a broken record, but I always feel like the 2002 film Minority Report got it right. You know, and maybe the movements that you know, Tom Cruise made, apparently, you know, he had to work out and had to almost be, you know, on like pulleys because his arm motions were happening so much. Maybe that were too broad that you needed to do for film, but I feel like that sort of experience that they showed in that film will be the future. I feel like that actually made sense, which also makes sense because on that film, you know, Steven Spielberg worked with a lot of user interface experts and futurists from MIT and from other places to really kind of, you know, create this vision of the future. And I increasingly feel like what we saw in that film, you know, more than a decade ago, is going to become sort of the future of interface, both with the voice and the hand gestures.
I also think that psychic triplets floating around the hot tub predicting the future makes a lot of sense as well. So that was a great movie.
It was a great movie. Precog triplets. Yep. In a pool of goo. Absolutely.
Well, in mergers and acquisitions news, LinkedIn said yesterday has acquired Refresh, which makes an app that compiles a dossier of each user's contacts based on publicly available data from social networks. The Refresh app will be closed on April 15th. Terms are not disclosed, and also not disclosed exactly what they're going to do with it, but I think it's pretty clear that they're going to enhance your sort of understanding of who people are based on what they've posted on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere. It probably makes sense, although it's going to probably creep people out when LinkedIn starts using it.
Yeah, with LinkedIn always kind of, you know, they straddle that line between enhancing workflow and being kind of delightful and being creepy. Don't you find? I find that they sometimes go over the edge of the creepy line a lot more than you would think for a social network, which is primarily about business. And they actually cross over the creepy line a lot more than you would think. But for whatever reason, I guess because of their profile and because of just the nature of how you use LinkedIn, I find myself more forgiving of the creepy things and actually forgetting all the instances in which they've done creepy things to me, to the point that I like, whereas, you know, Facebook tried to do 1/10 of some of the things LinkedIn does, we would remember it forever and talk about it ad nausea. But LinkedIn does it, and it's like a few months later we forget, and then the next scandal happens, and we forget again. I think that's just probably the nature of how the network works. But I think that this has the potential to be really cool stuff, especially when it comes to maybe contact management, which is something that, as people use LinkedIn for more and more reasons, does actually become really useful, especially when you change jobs or have other information happening, to really kind of have an up-to-date Rolodex.
Yeah. And I think that's why we forgive LinkedIn for their transgressions. I think also that they've got what everybody's got in the industry, which is Facebook envy, and they they want to retrofit this LinkedIn functionality, which is, like you said, it's about finding a job, staying in touch with your former colleagues, and they want to turn that into a social network where people go and they poke each other and chit chat and all that kind of stuff, but which is not anything that anybody wants, I don't think.
No.
I don't think people want to do social networking on LinkedIn. They just want it to be a useful Rolodex on steroids. That's what it is when it's at its best, but they just can't, they can't get away from the fact that, and we got a story coming up on this, that Facebook makes so much money and gets so many eyeballs and is so successful. Everybody wants a piece of that. Well, in courtroom drama news, a federal judge shot down Google's request to dismiss a lawsuit that says Google Wallet invades the privacy of users. The U.S. District Judge in San Jose, California, said Google's got to face claims that it breached users' contracts, violated the Federal Stored Communications Act, which limits disclosure of electronic records, and violated a California consumer protection law. She did, however, dismiss 2 other claims that I'm sure is very, very gratifying to Google, but they still have to face the music on these particular charges. Kind of weird, and of course they stopped doing this years ago. This is from 2013 or something like that. But they still have to face the lawsuit.
They've still got to own up to it. I think this just kind of highlights, a lot of the unease that people have had with digital wallets and with a lot of these kind of systems, because early on, I mean, this was kind of people's biggest fear, what Google would do when they first announced Google Wallet, and sure enough, they did kind of cross into that creepy side, as we were just talking about a little bit. I mean, it seems like they've changed their methods. I honestly think that's one of the reasons why Apple Pay has been so successful, is that people really do trust that Apple's not going to do anything with that information, and Apple's done a really good job of making it transparent about what they do and who has access to it. Because when you're talking about payment stuff, it really does become a whole other level of privacy for people than almost anything else.
Well, we got a little bit more news for you coming right up, but first, let's talk about Prosper. Prosper is the place to borrow money, because you're not borrowing it from a bank, you're not borrowing from your parents, you're borrowing it from people who are investing in you. This is Silicon Valley way to borrow money. You can borrow up to $35,000 in as few as 5 days, and you get a low fixed rate loan. You can do a debt consolidation loan. You can do a home improvement loan. You can do personal loans for business use. You can do an auto loan, get a new car. You can do short-term and bridge loans. You can even do green loans, which is financing for environmentally friendly projects. To check out your low rate instantly, and here's the best part, without affecting your credit score, go to prosper.com/twit. And now, for a limited time, Prosper is offering Twit viewers and listeners a $50 Visa gift card with your new low-interest loan. You can get up to $35,000 in your account in as few as 5 days, and a $50 Visa gift card. Just go to prosper.com/twit for this special offer that's just for you, members of the Twit Army. And we thank Prosper for their support of Tech News Today. Well, in the Human Resources Department, Uber successfully poached Facebook Chief Security Officer Joe Sullivan. Sullivan was at Facebook for 5 years, and before that worked on cybercrime for the U.S. Justice Department. He also worked at eBay and PayPal. We got some big numbers for you. $15.3 billion. That's how many dollars were spent on advertising on social networks, according to a new report by Strategy Analytics. That's a 41% rise over 2013. Another big number, 75. And here's what we were talking about before. That's the percentage of that global social advertising that went to one company, of course, Facebook. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Eric Elsinger in Gothenburg, Sweden, who posted this picture on Twitter. He says he watches Tech News Today on a giant 104-inch screen of glory. And there it is, taking over pretty much what looks like an entire wall. And there's Christina Warren in all her glory. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we will find it. Christina Warren, what are you working on now?
Nothing that I can really talk about.
Okay, top secret.
Top secret, but next week there's going to be tons of stuff coming out, so stay tuned. And I'm actually one thing I can't talk about. I'm working on is kind of a Heartbleed a year later analysis of basically how much things have changed, or spoiler alert, haven't changed when it comes to kind of, security of websites and how people are treating their passwords and basically what's happening, in that world a year after, what was one of the biggest, problems ever to kind of face the internet, Heartbleed. That's
a great idea for a story. And of course, you can follow and should follow Christina Warren at film_girl. Thank you so much for co-anchoring today, Christina Warren.
Thank you, Mike, and happy holidays to everyone listening in from wherever you are.
Yeah, awesome. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on your favorite podcasting app. Great place to subscribe, of course. You can choose any other way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC at live.twit.tv, or in the app or browser plugin of your choice. You can find all of those choices at twit.tv/apps. If you're ever in Sonoma County in California, come on in and watch us as part of our studio audience. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. You can also follow me on Meerkat. If you dare, use the app's search feature to find my name and just tap on the little check mark there. Let us know what you think. Send us email to tnt@twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW. And don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every single weeknight right here on the Twit Network. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you Monday.